If you listen to this podcast, chances are you're the kind of person who really wants to be of service and wants to help people with your business. But could your desire to help as many people as possible actually be a sabotage? That's exactly what we're going to explore in today's episode of the Heart-Centered Business Podcast. Now, not only is this episode number 490, it's also the 5th day of Tashmas, which means there's going to be a lovely little gift for you at the end of today's episode. So let's dive in and unpack this concept of wanting to help more people, but actually sabotaging your capacity to do exactly that. And because it's episode number 490, that means you can find all the relevant links and the show notes for today's episode over at tashcorbin.com/490. Hello, I'm Tash Corbin, a business strategist and mentor based on the Sunshine Coast in Australia. The mission of this podcast is to help heart-centered entrepreneurs to make more money, and in doing so, change the world for the better. This podcast was recorded on the lands of the Gubbi Gubbi and Jinnaburra people. Always was, always will be Aboriginal land. Let me be clear from the outset that I love how generous members of the Heart-Centered community are. And it is such a beautiful thing to witness and to be part of, and to tap into this amazing sense that people are really generous. They want to nurture each other. They want to help as many people as possible. And a lot of business strategy decisions come from this very generous place. People want to have accessible pricing, to be able to help more people, to ensure that they are placing less financial pressure on their buyers. What an amazing thing to have front of mind when you're making business decisions. There are quite a few very, very successful business people out there in the world who I wish were a little more generous and a little more considerate and thoughtful of their audience, of their buyers, and in particular of their staff as well. I'm looking at you, multinational organizations that somehow don't pay a lot of tax anyway. I have those same drivers. I am also someone who is very generous, and I want to be generous. I want to help as many people as possible. In the sacred money archetypes, nurturer is my third highest archetype. And so I'm absolutely someone who loves and adores a generous person, and how amazingly generous the people of this community are. But if you aren't smart with how you do it and how you get there, your desire to help more people could be the exact reason you're limiting the chances that you will be able to help more people. So, for example, if you dive into low ticket offers too soon in your business journey and therefore don't maximize the sales that you're making of your high ticket packages, your opportunity for people to work with you one-on-one, then it can sabotage/derail your income trajectory. And ask me how I know, because I did it myself. I've shared on this podcast several times before about how after my first ever 20K month in my business, I went to a webinar that was all about passive income and selling online courses. And it was talking about how if you're not selling passive income products, then your income is limited and it's capped. And so I completely derailed what was quite a successful business model and strategy in order to chase down that passive income, that elusive leveraged income. And in doing so, I went from a 20K month to making $3,800 in the sales in the launch of my first course. And then the month after that launch, I had a $900 income month. So I share this from experience, and also from the experience of seeing hundreds of people make that same mistake. just as I had nailed my packaging, my sales process, how I attracted and converted leads into VIP packages and work with me, instead of systemizing that, stabilizing that income level, getting my systems and my processes streamlined to be able to ensure that that was a solid baseline income in my business, I threw it all out in favor of selling something that was lower ticket. And one of my drivers, one of my reasons for wanting to do that was it would make it far more accessible for people to be able to work with me. It would make it a cheaper offer, and I could technically work with more clients at once because it was a leveraged product. And so therefore, in my head, I was making it more likely I would work with more people, but actually I ended up working with less people for an extended period of time. Unfortunately, I didn't learn that lesson just the first time. I've also had a few times throughout my 13 years of being a business owner where I have convinced myself that I needed something that was lower ticket. I convinced myself that I needed to have one of those tripwire things. I really got caught up in the way that people were talking about that online and just the comparisonitis of seeing other people saying that this is the best way to increase your mailing list while they are paying you to join your mailing list. It's the best way to create hunger in your buyers for your bigger package is to, rather than bring people in on freebies, bring them in on low ticket. That actually wasn't the case for my audience. And so going low ticket too soon actually can sometimes be a sabotage. It can derail your business strategy and your trajectory of income growth, rather than simply make you more money, get you more leads, and ultimately allow you to help more people. It can be the opposite. The other one is having too many freebies without a strategy for those freebies. So I also see quite a lot of the very generous entrepreneurs in my community wanting to create new freebie after freebie after freebie. They're coming up with a new webinar every single month. They're coming up with new opt-ins. They're coming up with new live events. Now they're going to do a live stream every Friday. Then they're going to do a live Q&A, Ask Me Anything, every second Tuesday. So all we're doing is just creating freebie after freebie after freebie. And I love freebies. I have a lot of freebies in my business myself, but I have a strategy for them. Each freebie that I create has an important job to do in my client attraction process. I'm clear on exactly who the freebie is for, what the next logical step would be for them to work with me or buy something from me, and I ensure that that opt-in or that freebie does its job. Now, I do have a previous podcast episode talking about opt-ins that are a waste of time. And so I'll link to that one in the show notes of today's episode as well, in case that's something that's coming up for you. So how do you know whether your low ticket offer or freebie is a sabotage versus a smart business strategy? Well, number one, I always look at the data. Where are people getting caught in my client attraction process? And is this offer going to solve that problem? In most cases, I don't have an audience growth issue. I have a lead generation issue, and they are two different issues that have two different strategic solutions. For most people, with the audience that you currently have and can currently reach with your strategies, you could or should be making more sales, should or could be generating more leads. And so we're not going to resolve that problem by creating another free resource. In a lot of cases, it's the follow-up to your existing freebies that needs some work to ensure that hot leads are able to engage with you and that you are taking responsibility for ensuring that you are making that invitation to anyone who has grabbed that free resource. Now, a lot of people tend to conflate the idea of a low ticket offer with lead generation as well. And so I just wanted to talk about one of the main reasons why low ticket offers can actually sabotage sales of the next item or product that you want to make an offer to those people about. And I'm going to share a story about something that I trialed in my own business. It was a program called Lean Startup School. So one of the things that I had identified back in 2016 was that I wasn't making as many sales of the takeoff program as I would like. And I had seen a lot of business strategy and marketing advice talking about how selling people a low ticket offer can shortcut building KLT, know, like, and trust, and can also make people far more likely to buy something else from you. So if people buy a low ticket offer, then there's a higher possibility or probability that they are going to purchase your high ticket offer. Now, this can be true in certain markets and with certain demographics. But what happened in my experience with Lean Startup School, which I sold for $49, was that I was just delaying people from buying the takeoff program. I ended up making over 400 sales of Lean Startup School in the first 6 months of releasing it. It was a self-study course. It also included access to its own Facebook community where there was a Q&A thread once a week where people could ask me questions to help them finish the course and get to the point where they felt like they were ready for the takeoff program. And I was using that as an active lead generation strategy as well. So anyone who was asking the kinds of questions that told me actually they're pretty much getting close to being ready for the takeoff program, then I would be able to make that invitation and not necessarily direct into the takeoff program, but asking qualifying questions, of course, helping them with their question and planting that seed that, ooh, okay, now it sounds like you're getting ready for the takeoff program. And my experience in delivering Lean Startup School was that all I had done was created a detour before people joined the takeoff program. So my conversion into the takeoff program actually dropped. My lead generation for the takeoff program was far less effective. The reasons for that are that, number one, whenever I suggested to someone, oh, this is great, like you're really getting this clear now, this is the kind of thing we could do further inside the takeoff program, the number one response I would get was, I'm definitely going to be joining the takeoff program, but I just want to redo Lean Startup School first so that I can make sure I've really nailed it. Or I haven't quite finished all of the modules of Lean Startup School, so I'm going to make sure I've got all of that finished first. And you've probably done this for yourself as well, where you've purchased something low ticket and you don't allow yourself to buy the next thing until you've completed that low ticket thing and you've done a really good job of it. And I do see this a little bit in my freebies as well, but far less often. And this is actually backed up by buyer psychology, particularly if you mostly sell to women or marginalized people. Women and marginalized people are more likely to hold themselves accountable for finishing their plate, right? Finishing what's on their plate. So if they have signed up for a low ticket offer and they haven't maximized their return on investment on that low ticket offer, they will delay even considering the next offer. I call this the homework issue. They have so much homework from the low ticket offer that they're not even allowing themselves to consider the next offer. And so in the following 6 months, after having done 6 months of sales of Lean Startup School, 400 people joining Lean Startup School, my launches of the takeoff program converted at a lower rate. And the people who were most engaged in those launches already had Lean Startup School. So what I had done was actually created a very convenient detour that gave people this sense that they had to complete the homework, no matter how much I told them, oh, well, we're going to dive into the things that were covered in Module 6 of Lean Startup School. That's actually where we take off from in the takeoff program. So you'll get that really nailed inside the takeoff program. But there was nothing I could say or do to get people across the line into the takeoff program. I worked harder to generate leads. I worked harder to generate sales than I was from my free lead magnets for the takeoff program. Now, part of the reason why it's less likely to occur with a freebie is that people hold themselves less accountable for completing every single part of something free that they've signed up for, particularly where that freebie is a one event freebie. And what I mean by a one event freebie is it's far less likely that someone will force themselves to do all the homework and do all the implementation if it's just a single thing that they've done. So like a webinar or a 6-page ebook that's just like one checklist that they have to complete, or it's just a single video, compared to if it's a 5-day challenge where there are 5 videos to watch, or it's a PDF ebook that has 6 sections, or it's a video series. So anything where there's more than one thing to do, there's more than one event, a multi-event lead magnet, people are more likely to get caught up in that homework issue and keep themselves to account for that. But where it's just a one-off, it's a webinar or it's a video or it's a one action that they need to take or one checklist of things that they can do in a single sitting, then if people haven't completed it or they haven't completed it perfectly, they're still not as likely to withhold the opportunity to jump into the next offer from themselves. But this is where having too many freebies can also contribute to a homework issue and can contribute to reduced lead generation and sales. Because if people go to your website and you have a free things page and there's 7 things on it, well, people are going to want to do all the things. And I also find that the more freebies that you have for people to sign up to, the more likely people get stuck in research mode. They get stuck in learning mode, but they're not necessarily focused on implementation. Now, I definitely see a big difference there for myself because with the Takeoff program, it actually has that live group coaching sessions. It has a lot of feedback from me. And so people are far less likely to get stuck. People have that access to me to ask questions, to help guide them through. Whereas if they've signed up for a bunch of my freebies, then they're less likely to reach out and ask me for help because it's free. They don't feel like they're entitled to that help and that coaching and mentoring. But also, there's just that sense of this is something that I need to do myself. So you can see here that even though creating lots of freebies, creating lots of free resources, or creating low ticket offers could absolutely be justified as a strategy to help more people, if you're keeping most of your audience stuck with a lot of homework, whether they've paid you $27 or nothing, you could actually be sabotaging the growth of your business, the actual sales that you could be making. And what that can end up feeling like is that you're doing a lot of teaching, a lot of creating, a lot of sharing for little to no income, which can leave you feeling under-resourced, can leave you feeling burnt out. It can leave you starting to resent your audience and labeling them as freebie chasers and tire kickers, and they're not action takers. They're not high intent enough for you. You start to lose hope. Maybe you carry that baggage around with you, and all of your business strategy decisions start to be tainted with this perspective that it's really hard for you to generate sales with the type of work that you want to do or with the type of audience that you've been attracting. And for me, that's a big uh-oh, right? If you find yourself with all of these caveats and all of these beliefs and having collected all of this evidence about what your audience does and doesn't want, what your audience will and won't pay for, what tolerance your audience has for high ticket versus low ticket, how many people in your audience are actually there for potential purchasing, right? There's just so much that we can be carrying around, and we're just collecting a bunch of evidence that's actually not helpful. It's a bunch of evidence that also might not be true. It's just a perception based on you having this desire to help as many people as possible and connecting the accessibility of what you teach to that help. So it needs to be accessible, i.e., it needs to be cheap. Now, I can already hear one of the biggest #butt tashes that I get when I start to talk about this and the pathway to generating more reach and to helping more people. But here's the thing. I shared with you at the start of this that I have a lot of freebies, right? I do have a lot of free resources. I now have over 400 episodes of this podcast, soon to be 500 episodes of this podcast. And so it's very reasonable to look at my business and think, well, I love that you give a lot of free advice, a lot of free information. You've got so many free resources, Tash. That's part of the reason why I follow you. That's part of the reason why I read your emails. And I absolutely love and appreciate that. So thank you so much. But I didn't have all of these when I was first growing my business. When I was first growing my business, I made it my mission to find what are the best 2 or 3 freebies that I can offer that attract the right leads and give me the opportunity to ask those qualifying questions and strike up those one-to-one conversations to learn how to generate leads and make sales in this niche. That's exactly what I was focused on in the first year of my business. When someone in my audience would ask me, hey, do you have any resources on how to structure a blog post and connect it to what I'm sending out on emails and what's going on socials, rather than saying, oh, let me whip up a free resource, instead, I made an offer of a one-to-one session. I would say, oh, that's actually something we could do in a 2-hour VIP one-on-one. And I, at that point in time, was doing 3 spots or 5 spots a week at a discounted price. And so if anyone asked me, do you have a freebie for this? Do you have a resource that teaches that? Do you have a blog that can walk me through this? If it was in any way a little bit more involved, a little bit more complex than the free content that I did have available, I would make an offer of a one-to-one, and I would make an offer for them to take one of next week's discount sessions. I was going to be doing 5 discount sessions, 2 hours for $97. Do you want to take one now? And we can sort that out for you in a session this week. And so I was getting super refined at exactly how I generated leads in my business, made offers to solve those problems, and I made those offers one-on-one offers, so then I could actually practice my qualifying, upselling, sales conversations, and really landing the value proposition and messaging that I needed to in order to be making sales on repeat. Because I was so diligent in those early months of my business in finding out exactly how to attract and convert people into my VIP package, which at the time was $2,500 for a 6-month coaching package, I was so diligent about, okay, how do I attract leads and make sales of this VIP package, this high ticket package? It meant that I had a 20K month in my 6th month of my business, but also it meant that I was absolutely diligent in nailing my messaging and my client attraction process. So then when it came to creating more freebies, to creating low ticket offers, I had the capacity to do it because I had the money. Now, I wish that I had, as I said, stuck in that one-to-one high ticket model for far longer. Now, I talk about how I make mistakes in my business so that you don't have to, and how every single mistake I've ever made was just a lesson, and I don't really have a lot of regrets about my strategy decisions in my business. But if I could go back in time to Tash with her business in the early days and change one decision, that would be the decision I would change. I would tell that Tash not to go to that webinar, not to get caught up in this idea of passive income or selling courses until I had really nailed my consistent lead generation and sales of VIP one-to-one packages. And I would not be playing with any low ticket offers or creating dozens of freebies until such time as I was making at least 4 VIP package sales per month. That's just one a week. And I'd increase the price at least 3 times. Think about my startup journey and having a 20K month, then derailing myself for months, creating a group program only to make $3,800 in sales in the launch, and the month after the launch having a $900 month. Now imagine that instead of doing that, I looked at my 20K month and I thought, oh my goodness, I have struck gold with this particular offer, package, niche. And instead, I set about over the next year refining and systemizing how I generated the leads, how I made the sales of that package, and consistently put up the prices once I had sold, say, 8 to 10 of those packages. I could have made a 20K month my normal baseline income of my business before launching my online course and before playing with low ticket offers and creating a bunch more freebies. And if I had done that, I wouldn't have had to let go my virtual assistant because I couldn't pay her. I wouldn't have had to go through the process of having a massive freak out that I hadn't been able to generate enough income in my business to be able to fund our living expenses. We wouldn't have had to put our rent on our credit cards for 3 months in a row whilst I tried to recover from this beautiful, amazing passive income thing that I had taken myself on a journey of. And so this is why inside my takeoff program, we don't sell VIP one-to-one packages as the end point of business growth. We use that as the pathway to super profitability and to consistent, sustainable income long term. There are so many different strategies out there that purport to free up your time from your income, that say that they generate far more high quality leads, especially the don't give away freebies, charge for your webinars. Honestly, for most people, that's a very bad business decision. And so I wanted to bring this to the podcast for us to have a real and frank conversation about it. For most people, putting a price tag on what they would normally do for free, like a webinar, actually significantly reduces the number of people who sign up for that particular thing, which reduces your audience growth, which reduces the potential leads that you have coming into your business. And if it creates the homework issue and people therefore are delaying investigating or even allowing themselves to consider buying your VIP offer or your high ticket program, then all we're doing is sabotaging and derailing your profitability and income growth. So, I do get a lot of butt tashes around the takeoff model, right? Takeoff helps people to learn how to attract leads and make sales of VIP high ticket packages. And so for a lot of people, when they're considering the program, they're like, oh, but I've heard that I should probably be selling courses, or I want to sell group programs because it's more accessible, or I want to help far more people. I don't want to just work one-on-one with 5 people a month. I want to work with 500 people a month. And my response to that is, yeah, absolutely. I want that for you as well. But let's actually look at what is the most efficient and sustainable pathway for you to get to that kind of accessibility, to get to that kind of reach and audience growth. If you've got a marketing budget of $10,000 a month and you don't need that to convert into $10,000 in sales every month, and you can sustain that for a few months, of course, starting with low ticket can absolutely be a viable strategy. But for most people in my audience, they don't have the resources or the time that it would take for them to craft something that actually grew in the way that they were told it would grow if they just put a price tag on it, or if they went low ticket. Instead of seeing selling VIP high ticket as the end point, we see it as the pathway to a profitable, aligned, sustainable business. Imagine if I could go back in time and invest a year before I created and sold the Takeoff program in getting my one-to-one package absolutely nailed in terms of lead generation, making those sales consistently. Imagine if I'd got to the point where I was making $20,000 a month as baseline, and launching the Takeoff program was on top of that instead of a detour from that. I wouldn't have had to let go my VA. I wouldn't have created financial instability and insecurity for myself. Therefore, my amygdala wouldn't have been fired up and keeping me in fight, flight, freeze mode for months on end, panicking that I'd completely broken my business. I would have been able to be so much more generous in the free resources that I created, in the price point of the Takeoff program, in the early stages of it. I also would have had the funding needed to grow my audience consistently month on month on month with paid ads. So I would have had the resourcing, I would have had the budget to be able to tap into some of those scaling opportunities that are only available to you if you've got the money. And I can tell you, during my $900 month, I was not thinking about how to grow my audience with paid advertising. I was not in any way able to even consider how I might grow my audience, how I might, invest in growth of my business. Instead, I was just trying to make ends meet, and I made some really desperate decisions in that process. So I wanted to share this one with you because I do know that for a lot of people who listen to this podcast very consistently, they do describe me as a very generous person, and they do appreciate that I do have a lot of free resources. I have a lot of podcast episodes that are very practical. I also have some low ticket courses that are self-study courses that people can do these days. But I want to be very clear that the pathway that I took in order to get there was the long way round with lots of detours, and the pathway that I would recommend not only to people who are listening, but also to myself back in the past, would be to focus on really nailing that sustainable long-term baseline income from VIP high ticket as quickly and effectively as possible, and just hang out in that good zone for a little longer. It's actually something that I say at the end of phase 1 of the Takeoff program. Takeoff is broken up into 3 stages. And at the end of stage 1, quite a lot of people have a strategy in which they can have 3 to 5 sales calls every week, and they're making 1 or 2 sales of a VIP package. And for a lot of Takeoff students, they decide not to progress to stage 2 straight away. Instead, they just stop and enjoy that stage of business, because we get to that stage of business in the Takeoff program without having to have social media going out on autopilot, without having to run webinars, without having to create a blog or a podcast or anything like that. We do it with high touch strategy. We do it with high connection, high conversion strategy. And so for a lot of people, they don't even realize the income potential that they have at their fingertips now without having to do all of those things. And instead, they are taking in a lot of messaging that's telling them, in order to even make one sale, you need a website, you need a blog, you need to be emailing a mailing list every single week, you need to be putting a post on social media every single day. And actually, inside the Takeoff program, we make sales before all of that exists. So rather than being in a hurry to create more and more in their business, to go and put time and energy into building out the website, coming up with the webinars, creating all of that content, right? You're putting yourself into a content generation cycle. Rather than doing that, a lot of people actually just decide, I'm going to hang out in the good bit for a minute. I'm going to hang out in this lovely little in-between phase where I know how to get a few leads a week, and at least one of those leads becomes a client, and I'm going to enjoy that it doesn't take me 40 hours a week to do that. I'm going to enjoy building up my confidence in my messaging and my sales process and my sales conversations. I'm going to enjoy building up my belief in the work that I do because I'm getting new clients fairly regularly. And then I'll move on to scaling up that client attraction process, scaling up my audience growth later. And I don't share this to try and convince you to join the Takeoff program. It's actually the opposite. You don't need to join the Takeoff program to get this advice from me. I share this advice freely, far and wide, because I see so many people tying themselves in knots, creating a business that keeps them very busy, but it's not in any way generating a decent baseline income. And they are spending far more time than necessary creating freebies, creating low ticket offers, showing up online, trying to build an audience, and none of the core foundations of their business have actually been validated. And the fastest way to validate your business foundations is through one-on-one conversations, one-on-one sales, one-on-one delivery. And I understand it's not the sexy model. I totally understand that. But that is the pathway to the sexy model in a way that sustains you. The last thing I want is for all of these amazing, generous, giving people that I see in the heart-centered community to remain under-resourced, underpaid, overworked, and burnt out. And that's why I get so ranty about this. Now, of course, if you did want to join the Takeoff program, you totally can. The doors are always open, unless I've closed them for a certain intensive coaching period, but I'm not closing doors at this point in time for a little while. So the doors to the Takeoff program are always open. I will let you know, it is the start of December, so we don't do live calls over the Christmas break. And the Facebook community also gets paused over the Christmas break. So if you were to jump into the Takeoff program now, it would mostly be a self-study experience until the middle of January. That's totally fine if that's what you'd like to do. If you want to dive in and learn these strategies and get out there and start practicing them over holidays, absolutely. But the reason why I wanted to share this was because sometimes it's just that light bulb of going, oh, I want to be generous. I want to help more people. I want to be accessible. I want to, really spread the word about what it is that I'm doing. I want to create a movement. I want to create change in the world. The fastest way and the most time-effective way to grow your audience, to grow a community, to build a movement is to pay for that audience growth. And if you don't have the resourcing to do that, sacrificing your income now in order to be more accessible or help more people is actually the opposite of what we need. You can help more people and you can be more accessible when you are resourced. And the way that you become resourced as a business owner isn't necessarily the low ticket strategy. It isn't necessarily focusing on that accessibility and giving away lots of freebies right now. Instead, it's getting those foundations nailed and learning how to attract and convert clients into a package or an offer that pays you really well for every single sale that you make. That brings me to the end of today's episode. I hope that it's been really helpful and insightful for you. Maybe it has planted the seed that the pathway to helping more people is to make sure that you fill your own cup first, you fit your own mask first. And because it's day 5 of Tashmas, I have a gift for you today. And that gift is I'm offering VIP one-to-one sessions, and we're going to do the ascending price offer. Now, if you haven't seen this before, what it is that on my Facebook page, I'm going to have a post where I offer VIP one-to-one sessions. And the first person to purchase a session gets it for $200. And then the next person will get it for $300. And then the next person will get it for $400. So the sooner you purchase, the cheaper that offer is. And I've got some instructions on how to grab yours and how to get in and get these deeply discounted sessions. So I'll make sure that I've got all of that with the show notes of today's episode at tashcorbin.com/490. Normally, I charge $1,495 per session, but we are starting off at $200. So that is a juicy Tashmas discount. We will take sales all the way up until they stop coming through, or we will close it off on the 12th of December because that will be the last day of Tashmas. So make sure you come over to those show notes, tashcorbin.com/490. And in that VIP one-on-one session, we can look at what is your pathway to being able to help more people. What is your pathway to that sustained baseline income? What is your pathway to being more accessible, to being able to grow your audience and create a movement and be super generous with your freebies, maybe have those low ticket offers as part of your strategy, but doing it in a way that is sustainable and that doesn't leave you under-resourced. By working together in a one-to-one session, I'll be able to help you address any concerns or reasons why you think it might not be possible for you, because there are sometimes certain markets and niches that are more price sensitive. There are sometimes some business models that aren't as effective in the high ticket VIP. So that is absolutely something that we can address and go through in detail in this one-to-one session. So good luck in jumping in as early as possible to get it as cheap as possible. Thank you so much for joining me for this episode of the Heart Center Business Podcast. Don't forget to go and grab the instructions at tashcorbin.com/490. And until next time, I cannot wait to see you shine. See you tomorrow for day 6. Bye for now.